Hi guys, welcome back to Words with Amber. I want to just start off by saying thank you so much. I'm gonna probably say it like a million more times in the future, but thank you to Peter Mon and to everyone that has come over to this channel from his shout outs. I truly was like not expecting a shout out at all, and to get multiple of them and also getting so many people coming over here supporting my first video, giving a nice comment. It's just made me feel like just so thankful and grateful for this community that Peter Mon has created on YouTube. And I'm just excited to also build a community with you guys here. So thank you so much for joining. Today we're going to be just talking about 6 books that I ended up giving 5 stars to last year. Last year I read 25 books. And it's a little bit harder to get a 5-star rating from me. So I want to just kind of talk about what goes into me giving a book 5 stars. And then I'm going to, just showcase those different books that I read, talk about, what it made me think about, and why I feel like it's a good book to read. So feel free to take those suggestions if you're interested. Again, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell. Like this video and leave a comment. If you have any recommendations for me of your 5-star reads, I'd love to hear about them. I'm always looking for my next good read. So we're going to start off by, I guess, just talking about why do I give certain books 5 stars. For me, if a book is getting 5 stars, it has to either have like really made me think in a new, like, interesting way, like in a very profound way. Or the story somehow has to be a story that I'm like, oh my God, like I'm going to be thinking back to this at some point. Or like the writing, or like the stylistic choices like of the author in like how they use like symbolism to represent something, or like how this plot line was like kind of meant to like make you think about something. If there's something in like the techniques that the author has used that I just feel like was like chef's kiss, like that'll get a 5 stars as well. So that's kind of the criteria I'm working with. I had a lot of books that like were 4 stars. When I was going back into my Goodreads to prepare for this video, I was actually surprised at some of the books that I like had put at 4 stars that in my head I thought like they ended up being a 5 stars. Like I think over time they like grew into a 5 star for me, but I just kept it to the books that actually got 5 stars on my Goodreads. So excuse me. Starting out with the only book that I have a physical copy of with me today, is this book called Post-Traumatic by Chantel V. Johnson. I just happened to come across this book when I was in Barnes & Noble's, and it was on one of those tables that they have like all over the store. And the cover just really caught my eye. The title caught my eye. But I'm very, very glad I picked this up, because truly it's one of those books that like I think is just like chef's kiss with like the writing style, the technique. I thought the story was really important, and it did make me think in a lot of different ways. So in this book, we are following our main character, Vivian. She is an adult. She is a lawyer in New York City, and she's working in like psychiatric hospitals, and her role is kind of like to be like a legal advocate almost for like some of the younger kids like in these systems who can sometimes like not be getting the best like trauma informed care. Like the book opens, this doesn't spoil anything because this is in the first chapter, but like in the first chapter there is a traumatized like patient who is in this hospital, and one of the staff is like not treating this client with like respect, really. Is kind of like being very pushy and like authoritative with this person, and that just ends up making the patient like feel even less safe. And so to kind of protect herself, she ends up grabbing like I think a pair of scissors or something that's like nearby, to kind of like protect herself or like defend against this like authoritarian like situation she's having with the staff member. And that causes like things to kind of escalate in the inpatient hospital. She's like starting to get like restrained, or like people are running after her, and it's Vivian, our main character, who ends up kind of like coming into the room and like kind of trying to like talk to her, calm her down, and help her like get back to a stable state so that like things don't escalate even further. So I kind of bring that up to say like just like the setting of like where this book opens up, but as the book goes on, we learn more about like kind of Vivian's like childhood and upbringing, and how that's kind of impacted her, and how that continues to kind of show up in the present. She has a very close friend who's also been through a lot, and I think at certain points in the book it's kind of like you see these discussions happen between Vivian and her friend, and Vivian kind of starts to come to this conclusion that like maybe she's not as healed from what she's gone through as she originally thought she was. And I just thought it was one of those books where, again, like the writing was so good. I've been impacted by trauma myself over the years, and so I felt like there were certain words or like ways that things were talked about that I was like, yes, like this is exactly how I felt. And I just think that's such a wonderful experience when you can read a book and it really just like speaks to you in that way. As well as too, like, right, I felt like it provided so many thought-provoking questions of like, how do we really like treat or view people that like have been through trauma, and like how can we, you know, have more grace for them, or like how can we rethink about like what healing looks like in that space. So I would highly recommend this. That was my first 5-star read to talk about today. For pretty much all the other books that I have today, I don't have a physical copy, or I have one that like I do own a physical copy, but I have it out on loan to another friend right now. So I feel like last year I was able to get through so many books because I found that if I started reading books on my iPad and I did it with like the scroll feature, I would just breeze through books like nobody's business, versus like holding a book and like constantly turning the pages and like knowing how many pages I'm going through. I don't know if that's just something with like my brain, but if you've been in a reading slump or like have been having a hard time getting through books that are like more physical, or even like just like swiping like page to page when you're reading electronically, like I recommend trying the scroll feature if you have that option. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo. I would consider this book to be kind of a like a family suburban just like drama. So it's not going to be like a very thrilling book. Some people might consider it more of a slow burn. But for some reason my brain like gets some kind of itch scratched when I read like family dramas or suburban dramas, particularly if they're written very well. And I do really admire Claire Lombardo's writing. This is my second book that I've read of hers. But basically we're following this main character, Julia. She is a stay-at-home mom, and she's kind of at this point where like, you know, she's gotten kind of the white picket fence dream that she's been, you know, trying to achieve up to this point, but she's kind of feeling like some kind of void or some kind of like dissatisfaction with her life. And she ends up running into this woman named Helen, and they start to become friends, and all of a sudden it creates like this big spark in her. It creates a lot of this change. It's almost like this moment she's been looking for to like get out of this funk of feeling like something's missing. But as we kind of follow the story and time goes on, we kind of also watch like Julia's life kind of unravel in different ways. Like she goes from this high to like things kind of starting to fall apart, partially just because like so much time has passed. And also I feel like she's in kind of like this midlife crisis stage of like, okay, this was everything I thought I ever wanted, but I'm like, where is this dissatisfaction coming from, if that makes sense? I don't want to get into any more details beyond that because it's kind of just the details of the story, but again, this is a book that, you know, I just felt like it really kept my attention. I think I finished this book in like just a few days, and it's a bigger book. It's like 500 pages, I think. And I just felt like the writing was just so good. I could just like read and read and read because of like just how beautifully everything was described. And like, again, it's like that family drama kind of like done very well kind of thing. So that was book number 2 for me. The next book I want to talk about is the book Beloved by Toni Morrison. I had heard a lot about Toni Morrison's books before. I've always seen them get recommended, but this was my first read ever of hers, and truly like was absolutely blown away. This is a book that definitely I think of a lot and had a big impact on me. Essentially, we are following like a family that was formerly enslaved, and they're now freed, and they have this home now on a certain side of town, and the home is haunted, and it's kind of being haunted by what seems to be like a very angry like infant spirit, is like how it's kind of described in the book. And I just found it to be like a very interesting like horror book. I definitely would consider it to be horror. And it was just like very like creepy, very suspenseful. And I felt like in the same way that I really admire The Handmaid's Tale as a book and as a show, because like Handmaid's Tale is like, you know, trying to be this very like thrilling dystopian novel. And it's like so fucked up and it's like so crazy. But like when you actually like look deeper into the storyline, like you realize like everything is based off of something that's actually happened to women in some kind of culture or like part of the world, either in the present or in the past. Like I just feel like that gives so much more like, I don't know, juice to like how impressed I am with like a book or a story or anything like that. I feel like that's like the highest form of art, when you can make something that's like so good in and of itself. Like Handmaid's Tale is a great story and a great show. I feel like just in and of itself, like in terms of like it really captivates your attention. It's very well done. But on top of that, to know that there's such a big message behind it, I think like just makes it like that much more like, you know, respectable in my opinion. So I bring that up to kind of say like that's how I felt about like Beloved too. I felt like it was doing a similar thing of like kind of trying to open the reader's eyes to like the experience of like what it was like to be like, you know, formerly enslaved. Like now you have some freedoms, but like the world has not just changed because everyone has just been freed now. And like, you know, there's a lot of, you know, hardships that this family faces both internally and also externally. Someone from like the family's past kind of like comes and joins the family in this house, but then the person who joins the house starts to like interact with this spirit and gets kind of driven away. Again, I just thought it was like a very, very good book. I don't want to say more than that to like spoil anything, but would highly recommend. The next book I want to talk about is this book Lilith by Eric Rickstand. I found this book from the Apple iBook store. Pro tip if you're trying to save a little bit money but read some more ebooks. Every single day I pretty much go into the Apple like books store on my iPad, and there's this certain section that's like special offers, like $5.99 and less or something like that. And like usually every single day it gets updated and there's a few books that like get changed in and out. But I check that almost every single day to find new books, because a lot of times there's like a book that I've been wanting or everyone's been talking about and it just happens to be on a flash sale for like $3 or $2, like just for those couple of days. So that's how I found a lot of these books that I'm like reading about. And that's how I found Lilith. So Lilith is about a mom and her younger son. Her younger son wakes up and he says that like he just has a bad feeling and he doesn't want to go to school. And his mom is like, you know, kind of like sympathetic. Obviously it's her son, it's a little kid, and like, you know, we can all relate to that idea of not wanting to go to school. But she's just like, nope, we got to go to school. And she also works at the same school. So they end up going to school that day. And this isn't spoiling anything because it's in the like summary and it's in like right at the beginning. But essentially there's a school shooting that occurs that day at the school. And both the mom and the son are impacted. And the mom obviously starts to feel like some kinds of regrets about like not heeding her son's kind of like warning about that bad feeling in the morning. But as like the book goes on, they also bring in kind of like these like characters that are meant to be kind of like political figures that are like commentating on the shooting, and her as a survivor now and having her son be impacted as well as herself. We kind of start to see the mom's like mental health kind of like unravel. She kind of becomes a little bit radicalized. And it's kind of hard to tell of like, is this really just like what could happen to someone who like would lose their like child or like would be impacted by such a traumatic event like this? Like, is this just like, I felt like it left you as the reader thinking like, is this kind of like a normal like response? Like, would I really unravel this much if I was put in these shoes or in this position? Or like, is there something going on with this main character where like maybe there was like an underlying like, I don't know, like psychosis or something like that, and like this just like triggered it to like come online, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but I just found it like very fascinating. I felt like it was, you know, political commentary obviously on like guns and school shootings and how we talk about that, and also like, you know, just looking at not only the political side of it but also the micro side of it of like what is it really like to like have gone through that or have like someone in your family go through that. So I would highly recommend it. Well written. Again, it was a book that I felt like was kind of like in that beloved Handmaid's Tale kind of basket, right? Where like it's just eye-opening and very interesting. The next book I want to talk about is The Light Pirate by Lily Brooks-Dalton. Again, I definitely do not stop thinking about this book. I think about it all the time. This book takes place in Florida. I can't recall if it's like supposed to be exactly present day or if it's like a few years into the future, but essentially we're in Florida. We're following this family that's like lived down there for most of their life, and um, we're in the throes of like a climate crisis. So if you've been fascinated at all, like I don't know about you, I'm gonna like self-disclose this, but um I've had some like fascinating like can't look away like stuff on my TikTok with like the wildfires in LA, which obviously like I send like, you know, my prayers and my thoughts and everything out to anyone being impacted by that. It's very serious and I think it's horrible what's going on there. But like there's something about like just like seeing that content on my TikTok feed where I like just want to keep consuming it. Or like when we had really bad hurricanes going on in Florida earlier a few months ago, like I would just stay up and like be fascinated by like watching all that stuff. I know it's probably not healthy, but I say that to say like if you relate to that in any way where like for some reason that was scratching an itch, I think you need to read this book. Because we're in Florida, right, like I said, a little bit into the future, and basically like hurricanes have become like so normal and so devastating that like Florida's basically like sinking into the ground essentially. And there's certain residents who like are kind of like have this mindset of like, hey, I've lived in Florida my entire life. Like I've survived hurricane after hurricane. I'm not abandoning my home. So there's certain people that like don't want to leave when these storms are hitting, but like it's becoming very, very, very serious with like the impact it's having on being able to get around, to get out of your house and things like that. And so we're kind of following this family, and like a hurricane's about to be hitting, and the this is not spoiling anything because it's right at the beginning. The wife kind of again has like a bad feeling that like they need to get out of there, but her husband and her sons like are very adamant about like wanting to stay. And so like you just kind of feel like you're there, like you're in that moment of like, God, what the hell would I do if like a hurricane was about to be impending and like I can't leave. And then too, like as the story goes on, it just talks about like just how this has impacted like the entire community, and it kind of leaves you with this idea of like yes, you could leave Florida and you could then go to, you know, Oklahoma or like some other state like higher, you know, away from the ocean, but like the idea behind it is kind of like this climate is deteriorating so much that like it's kind of beyond repair. Like what's happening here is just going to be happening everywhere else. We are just like on the front lines of it happening to us first. So kind of scary, you know, if you don't want to get like extra anxiety. I don't know, there's something about me that likes to torture myself with like deeper, darker stuff that I'm reading. So if that feels like a little too close for comfort, you know, you don't have to read it. It's okay. I won't judge you. But I thought it was really, really like I said, I still think about it today. I read this book like last summer, before some of these bigger like climate stuff were going on, but like I don't know if it helped me or hurt me to like now have that in the background when these things are happening. But I'd still recommend it. I would read this book again. Lastly, I want to talk about the book My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This book should come with a lot of trigger warnings, a lot of you know, like essay, grooming, you know, R-word kind of stuff. Like it's dark. Like I think My Dark Vanessa is a very good title for it. This is a book that like you're gonna need a palate cleanser afterwards. It was very hard to get through at certain points. Essentially, we are following this young girl, Vanessa, who's I think like in mid-high school at the time of the book, and she's kind of like emotionally neglected. You know, she doesn't really feel like she has a good sense of herself. She's very vulnerable. She's very shy. She doesn't really know if she's good or if she's good enough in any way. And so she ends up, you know, kind of being in the perfect vulnerable state for someone to take advantage of that. And so she starts to develop a friendship. I put that in quotes because it's disgusting. But like basically she starts to experience like grooming behaviors from, I think it's her English teacher, who, you know, clearly probably has his own stuff going on if he's preying on people of this kind. But what I found to be very interesting about the book is like it starts out with like, I think it goes in, the timeline switches between her as kind of an adult and then like her kind of flashing back to like this time in her life as a teenager. as she's kind of an adult, her life hasn't been like what she had hoped it would kind of be. Her trauma has definitely kind of impacted her. And, you know, she's kind of like going back into these memories and trying to make sense of like what happened to her. Was it my fault? Was it not? Because on top of her, you know, being victimized, also too, like there are certain people who get brought in over time, like her family members or people from the school. And unfortunately, again, because we don't always know how to like talk about trauma, or like we don't really understand trauma, oftentimes people say the wrong things or do the wrong things, and it unfortunately like re-victimizes people. And so we see our main character kind of get like victim blamed, overtly and covertly, in ways that like the school responds to what happened, the way that her abuser responds to what happened, the way that her parents respond to it, or like lack of response to it, you know. And so again, it's very sad. It's dark upon dark upon dark. But I just felt like by the time that I had finished the book, I felt like there were times when like I was obviously like so empathizing for the character. There were times when she was like processing stuff, and I felt like she was like taking away the wrong message about it, like either internalizing blame or whatever, or like I'd almost get like mad at her sometimes, not at all in blaming her, but more so like, no, like this is not your fault kind of thing, like wanting to like shake her out of it kind of thing. And I just felt like when I finished the book, I was like, you know what, maybe the purpose of this book was to kind of like paint this idea that like people go through trauma, and like there is a such thing as like not a perfect victim, right? Like I think sometimes we have this expectation or this thought that like, you know, you go through what you go through, you talk about it, you learn from it, and then all of a sudden like you're on the side of like, this person is wrong, this person's bad for me. Our protagonist is kind of like still has some feelings of love for this person, even though that they did take advantage of her. And I just felt like it forced me to kind of think about like whoa, like why am I trying to fit this person into a box of like what I think is good for them kind of thing. I don't know if any of that makes any sense, but I just felt like it left me like, you know, it left so many thought-provoking you know, questions in my mind. And again, it's a book that I still think about, and I do think it's important, you know, her story, and to hear about her story. So yeah, that kind of wraps up all of the 5-star reads I got from this past year. I might do some honorable mentions down the line for some of the books that, again, I felt like there were a few books that like when I went back into my Goodreads, I was just like, why did I give this 4 stars and not 5? Like, you grew into a 5-star for me. I still think about you. So anyway, I think that's going to be all for me today. Let me know what you thought of this video. You know, I'd love to hear your feedback. Let me know about any 5-star reads that you have. Again, if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't liked, please go ahead and do that. I would really, really appreciate it. And I'd love to have you as a founding member of my channel. So I'm going to get off here today. I do intend to probably record another video sometime this weekend, but I wanted to get this up as fast as I could. Again, thank you so much to Peter Mon and to all the vloggerinos and good Judies that are over here. I'm so happy to have you. And I can't wait for the next video. See you guys later.